have a responsibility here to face up to the problem, to face up to the failings of the current system, and it's our duty to try and address this issue better than we have been, and not to do so would be an unforgivable error.
My impression from the debate so far is that the prevailing mood of member states is to say no to dismantling of the provisions of the conventions, but yes to returning to the original spirit, protection of health, welfare and safety of people.
For example, in Holland, we have a government at this moment who wants to regulate, but they say they can't do it because of the United Nations. So what's supposed to be their stand at this time? If Uruguay is possible, where it's possible to do, and Holland says we can't do it because of the United Nations, while it's still sort of the same thing.
United Nations is not a straitjacket for member states, and the drug control conventions are not providing for any sanctions. They build on the principle, on the goodwill and compliance with international law, and it's up to each government to decide whether this government is complying or not complying with the provisions of international law.
But we have a new discussion going on, the international approach of cannabis. On the stage, we have an international group of people who are activists, fighters, I don't know how you can call them, men on arms, women on arms and arms. We've got Jules Stobbs, Myrtle Clarke, Mike Weiss, Ben Dronkers, Dana Larsen, and Kenzi. And they are very important people, I tell you. Give them a round of applause.
Hello.
I would love to start, because it was the recent developments in Geneva. Kenzi, can you tell a little bit what happened there with the WHO and what we can expect with their review that's coming up, so they say?
All right. I can talk like that. Good. Well, yeah, indeed. Besides all the development that's happening in different countries that we will have exposed after, at the United Nations level, at the level of discussion between countries, we have also very interesting developments, although maybe it's just an embryo of developments in a way, but we are a lot of different pathways opening, and this review of WHO is a huge one. For now, let's say the part of the UN that has been focusing on cannabis and on drugs in general has been the criminal justice part and the police part. In the Commission of Narcotic Drugs of the United Nations, usually you could meet police authorities of all over the globe, but very few health authorities. Now it's changing, and on cannabis in particular, because the WHO is making a scientific assessment, a full review of the evidence, and in view of a possible recommendation for a modification of the treaties schedules. There is a huge shift toward health and getting away from the criminal justice and police approach. So it's kind of interesting, and it's backing what's happening in the country in a way.
Okay. And Jules and Myrtle, you were there as well. What can you add to this comment of?
We weren't actually at the World Health Organization, but Myrtle submitted video representations from Fields of Green for All, our South African non-profit company. And we got through the short list, and we got a live link to watch 14 7-minute videos from maybe 6 continents about mostly how they've critically appraised CBD now. This is the transition between critically appraising CBD and now critically appraising the other 400 bits of the plant. Yeah. And that will happen in next year. They have to do it within the next 6 months.
Okay.
So we saw some quite extraordinary video coming into our office in Johannesburg, because most of them were positive. There were some corporations present, and there were some very corporate videos, but there were some very twisted tales of how cannabis is just not medicine, and you should be aware of CBD because it's easily converted to THC and people will abuse it.
Ben, aren't you getting so tired of these kind of things that are being said by official states? These kind of comments, aren't you tired of all this all over again and explaining all over again and again and again?
Well, in a way, yeah, I was just thinking it before, that it is tiring to see that all over the world people are making action, and sometimes they make progress and sometimes they throw you back. And that is the whole world is going like that. It's like a yo-yo. Holland is a good example, like we were very tolerant and it changed to not tolerant anymore. So, and the politics is business. And what you see is big corporations to really put it down. That's what my idea is. And what we see in Holland now, that they come with a new experiment to regulate cannabis through some coffee shops in a few cities, very small. And they're gonna do a 4-year trial experiment. And to me, it is not a trial, it's not an experiment, it's just to slow it down again. Just keep it down again for another 4 years, and then we can make a new report. Yeah. And the lying is going on, you know. I don't know who said it, but he said it so good. They're lying, and they're lying, and they're lying, and that's, you don't come through. And then on the other side, you got the media, and lucky we got media like you guys now on the social network. But for the rest, the media is just putting opposite what people say, you know, or what happened now in Geneva. It is not news, but to me it is big news, you know, it's really happening. Yep. It's too bad Michael Krovich was not here, you know, I know the guy already a long time, I know he did a good job also there. Definitely. And we supported him with Sensi Seeds a long time already, with all the movements, what we can do. But it is tiring to see that you make 2 steps forward and that puts you back 3, and you have to go again. And what is too bad, but it is also not easy to do, to unite all these different things. Just the speakers before, they're talking about research, you know, scientific research. Well, we do research also with the seeds, you know, the genetics and but everywhere they do research, and then they lie about there's no medical value. Even in England, Theresa May's husband owns 20% of GW. They're growing grass, and the government say there's no medical value. So what is this? It's all bullshit. It's all lying.
But then I want to say, I think the person next to you, then Larsen, I think you're the most happiest person on the stage then.
Well, because Canada is moving towards,
well, that's not something small. I mean, you had...
I'm a happy guy.
You've done tremendous work. I mean, I've read what you've done with Jody and with Mark and the whole background, and the accomplishment is huge, and I think we should agree with that. That's the key of your success in that sense.
Well, I think breaking the law openly and civil disobedience is very important, and where our movement really has had the most success. The laws in Canada are supposed to change in a few months, but the laws haven't changed. Bongs are still illegal in Canada to buy and sell, and there was a time when bong sellers and bong shops would get raided regularly, and it was by taking it one step at a time. And although it's nice to have the one big victory, incremental change is ultimately what you get. You know, one step at a time, a little bit every year. An example, in Vancouver, we have a 420 rally, a big event on April 20th. It's been going on for 24 years. Well, the first year, it was a couple of dozen people in a park nervously smoking joints, hoping they weren't going to have a problem. Slowly, a little bit at a time. Now, we have 100,000 people, 350 booths, all selling cannabis, edibles, extracts, high-potency weed. There's nothing else like that in the world, where you have one day, huge cannabis farmers market, totally free public event. And people look at it, well, how did you do that? Well, we went a little bit at a time. One guy showed up with a bag of joints one year. Somebody had more of that. Then somebody set up a table one year. And then you just grow and grow. And there's pushback, and you do get sometimes you take a step backwards. But I think it's always ultimately a forward thing. It depends on the country and on your constitution and how the police behave as to whether, you know, in some places civil disobedience is very, very difficult. But I think when you have that ability and when you stage it and you find the weak spots, you know, well, okay, seeds, maybe we can get away with selling seeds to people. Maybe I can get away with selling cannabis, you know, just to certain people. Or maybe in Canada, a lot of it was medical also, and the medical was the gateway to open up to broader and to also change perceptions of cannabis. It's no longer a hedonistic, bad thing that people do, that's some dirty habit. No, it's a medicine that helps grandmothers with their arthritis and helps epileptic children with their seizures. And so maybe if it's good for them, it's also good medicine for the healthy person that takes it too. And I think that change of attitude, but but for me, I think is making the reality you want. And although I'm glad you're doing that terrible, difficult work at the UN, I feel like it's going to come from the bottom up, and that the UN may be the last place to change these treaties after they've long been ignored.
But then again, one person, especially also TNI, is very much busy with that. But they say if we ignore the UN in these kind of things, then we can also other countries are going to ignore human rights and other things. So we need to keep on going also with the United Nations.
Oh,
is there
absolutely.
any light that it is not going to take another 100 years with the United Nations as well? Myrtle?
I definitely think that there is light. Since 2016, when we went to UNGAS in New York, I think that there has been great strides, and it's very important for countries like South Africa to be involved at the UN level and other countries in Africa. The first thing that it helps us with is it connects us with other countries in Africa, and also builds a solidarity, because so many African countries rely on international aid. And one of the first things when we started our campaign, one of the first things that came out loud and clear, but what about the international treaties? Because very, very poor countries and major cannabis-producing countries like Lesotho, Swaziland, Malawi, Tanzania, they can't gamble with their international aid.
No.
You know, this is what feeds their people.
Yeah.
And in South Africa, our campaign is really driven by the farmers and our traditional healers. You know, we don't speak to politicians. We're fighting the politicians in the court. Yeah. So they make us come out in a rash, politicians. Yeah. We have to fight it in the court because we've got one of the best constitutions in the world. Our constitution's only 22 years old. So it's new, it's vital. And if we contest it against our constitution, not in terms of medicine and anything, we go a step higher than that, on sovereignty and human rights and human dignity, and then right to health and happiness. Yeah. So for Africa, our farmers are our most important people, because you'll hear in countries like Canada, we want to get rid of the black market. With us, we want to legitimize our so-called black market, our underground market. That's very, very important. Okay. We have 900,000 cannabis farmers in South Africa who support upwards of 30 million people. The cannabis puts the food on the table. We don't want to get rid of the black market at all. We love them. They're our friends. They're our family. Yeah. You know, so it's really very important. We also have 350,000 traditional healers who've been using cannabis for 700 years. Yeah. So we don't have to teach our doctors. The traditional healers can teach our doctors because they know about cannabis. If you go to a Sangoma, a traditional healer, he or she will be able to tell you, just by looking at a plant, they will be able to tell you that one's good for asthma, that one's good for epilepsy. Yeah. So we have a different perspective in South Africa.
Okay. Mike, you've been traveling around a lot. You've been filming and making a lot of documentaries. Where do you think at the moment is the best thing happening? Colombia?
No.
Colorado?
Places that I haven't been definitely piqued my interest. I went to the Rift Mountains this last year. That's one place that I think there's, you know, they've been doing this for thousands of years, like she was saying, in South Africa. And so where I come from in the United States, yes, we have legalization, but the problem is we still have prohibition. And so this is a huge problem because it's kind of like a false legalization where only certain people can go and purchase, and while others still are being jailed and are still paying high prices for this. And now we were lucky in Colorado, we had kind of a referendum that passed. So we had medical cannabis, but then we saw the big corporations come in and they start limiting everything, unfortunately. So I just think it's important for activists like ourselves and like you guys to stick together, come out to things like this, network with us online, because we have to stay together. Movements like the recreational ones that are happening in the United States are appeasing some activists to kind of not fight so hard any longer because they can smoke openly, but there's still many problems. You know, possession now becomes driving under the influence. So the laws are still the same, they just change the words. And so I think it's always important to this. Civil disobedience is important. Fighting in the courts is important. Billy Caldwell's story right now that's going on in the UK is pretty interesting method of just putting this in the people's faces, that this is a medicine, we're patients, we're not criminals, we're not going anywhere. I mean, you're going to try to kill us by not giving us access to the medication we want, and you're going to make us buy your pharmaceuticals, but we already tried that, and it didn't work, and this is what we need, and so, you know, we're not going anywhere. We got to keep protesting and keep fighting and just do this together and unite.
And Ben, how difficult is it? How difficult is it to preserve the freedom, that's not be patented and you know, that people are free to use any seed they want? Well, how can you protect your company, for example, with those huge, even bigger companies?
Well, what I said already, it is cannabis. When we started, it was very little and very few people, right? It came to an industry, like what you see here in the market, you know. The whole cannabis industry is an industry, so we are working in information, you know, with the museum, Sensi Seeds and hemp flax, we do hemp. But what I wanted to say, what we don't see is the disobedience. I'm totally agree with it. That's what we did here in Amsterdam. Henk de Vries was here, and Bulldog. We with our seed shops, and that was all new. But if you're talking disobedience in Asia, where I live now, you know, and you can still hang or get death penalty for 300 grams, or like in Thailand. And now the beautiful thing is that the medical part is changing the world. The Philippines legalizing medical cannabis. Yeah. Thailand just recently, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, legalizing medical. And from the medical, it will come. And that is the real point, because what we don't know so much, like America, we know they have a real heroin problem, hard dope problem, right? But in Asia, we have all this methamphetamine problem. So poor countries, it's a cheap dope, and all the, like in Thailand, 20% of the students use it, you know, and that makes you really dumb, you know, it doesn't make you smart. If you smoke a joint, you get smarter, I can say that. The medical proof, the scientific proof is there. So it doesn't make you dumber. So it is stupid as a government to say, like what the famous guy told me once, he said, you know, if a religion tell you what you use or not use, what you eat or what you don't use, or don't eat or don't drink, that is up to a religion. But a government never should tell you what you eat and drink. And that is the point what have to come over here, because everything becomes regulated. Natural products, natural herbs, natural healing. And it's stupid. So it is all this commercializing, and disobedience is one of them that we really can do, but not in countries like Malaysia, Philippines, Asia, whatever. So this kind of country is changing now on the medical part, and that is very positive. So that's why I believe as long as America keep it illegal, the world will have a problem. As soon as that really tip over, and like with Canada, it tips over, then the whole world will tip over. And the world need it, because it's the plant that can save the world.
Definitely. Dana, what can we learn from here in Holland, for example? You know the battle we're fighting at the moment. What can we learn from Canada? What we can or what we shouldn't do, or what is your best advice?
I think we see in Canada and other countries that it comes from the bottom up, and it often starts with cities rebelling against the federal laws, because it's easy to write a law at the federal level, but very hard to enforce and deal with those realities as a city. And so in the States, we saw, you know, before California, it was San Francisco and Denver and Seattle, and in Vancouver has really changed things and made our own decisions and gone against federal laws. And in Holland, it was Amsterdam and other cities saying, we're just going to do it this way. And so I think trying to work at the local level with the closer governments and finding that's the pathway to make things change in the long run. But I think ultimately we need all different angles of attack to make these laws change. And you know, we went a long way in Canada over the last 25 years, from bong shops being raided and seed banks being raided to having hundreds of dispensaries, all illegal, but all operating openly, and our government moving towards this legalization that we're getting, which isn't perfect by any means. It's full of limitations, it's full of corporatization, it's full of the same demonization of cannabis and cannabis users. legalization to me should come with an apology and a recognition and an admission that cannabis prohibition was never a good idea. And it was always a bigoted, racist, ignorant thing and never positive, not well-intentioned at all. It wasn't some honest mistake. But what we get is one where, well, we know cannabis is dangerous and we're going to legalize it to keep it from the kids and we're going to get organized crime out of it because we're all organized criminals involved in this and that kind of, and by their definition we are, by the way they write the laws, they make us criminals. But I mean, I think in Canada it shows what a little bit of change can do over time. The law we're getting is by no means the end of our efforts in Canada. We have a long way to go. But I'm still thrilled to have that. We can grow 4 plants per household with a bunch of stupid restrictions that aren't fair. But I think getting from 0 plants to 1 plant or 4 plants is very difficult. Getting from 4 plants to 100 plants or to more, it's still difficult, but it's not as difficult. And once we have some kind of legalization and people can see the world doesn't end, things aren't only fine, they're better than they were under prohibition, that then more change becomes easier. But I think also sometimes people get complacent. I've got my joint, I don't really care anymore. And I will also say one other thing, and that for me, it's not just about cannabis. I think cannabis is the world's greatest plant, one that I love, but I think it's about the whole war on drugs. And cannabis is the first step in that. And the first part of that, and I talked to my, that coca leaves and opium poppies and psilocybin mushrooms and peyote cactus and all these sacred plants that have been banned are all very useful and beneficial when used properly. And what's good about cannabis is it's much harder. You can't turn cannabis into a deadly substance like you can with some of the others when you concentrate and change them in that way. But I really believe this is the beginning. So to me, it's not just about that, but cannabis is the key to unlocking the whole drug war and ending all the prohibition, which I hope I will see in my lifetime, but there's a lot of work ahead.
Kenzi, hold on. But Kenzi, what would you say? Ben, go on.
No, what I wanted to say is that I realized, since I was in Asia, and I realized it 35 years ago in Holland, that junkies or drug abuse with the bad dope, but also cannabis was included, right? It's the drug war. That all over the world you have this drug war, everywhere. And the most crazy thing is, everywhere you go, you can buy it within 10 minutes. You ask a taxi driver, anybody, you can buy it. And where you sure can get it, believe it or not, in the whole fucking world, in jail. Every jail, they put you in jail as a drug problem. They put you in jail and you can buy it you can buy everything there. And that is no lie. In Holland we have special a wing in the prison. They call it the drug-free wing, and they couldn't hold it, even in the drug-free wing. They sell heroin, cocaine, anything you want.
In Bolivia, they make cocaine in the big prison downtown. It's known as a place where they make cocaine, and you can actually go there as a tourist and they pay some money. And so the guards let you go walk around the prison. It's crazy.
So how can you keep this system like putting people in jail for what? To buy dope there,
Is there any discussion internationally, Kenzi, about, for example, you mentioned in the Philippines, for example, or other places where there's harsh penalties, people get killed. What's the international discussion? Is this seen and going to change?
I don't know if it's going to change, actually. It depends, but as we see Philippines at the same time that they are encouraging the mass murders of people suspected of drug abuse or drug trafficking, they also passed this kind of law. And it's, in the end, I think it connects to what Dana has been saying a couple of times. It's incremental changes, small changes, and bottom-up changes as well. I think here we have a good representative panel of small bottom-up changes, people pushing small, or maybe small at the side of the planet. On our side, it's a huge things, but in the end, small changes here and there that in the end make a corpus of elements that we can also at the international level, at the level of United Nations, use to leave no room to prohibitionist theories in the end and to force the way to regulation. I think we have to see it maybe, I was thinking about it just before listening to you all, it's kind of a Tetris. Maybe
each one of us, each one of the activists is a different shape, different color, different strange form. You don't know where to put it. It arrives here. You don't really where it was supposed to go. And in the end, it eliminates when you manage to connect them. It eliminates a line, and you can go forward.
Well, we should not forget, I think, because as a young kid, you know, I was about 17. I started smoking, and then I was a group of kids, you know, and the first guys starting to use heroin, and then the big flooding of junkies came in Holland. And that's happening now in America. You should not forget that happens also in the Philippines. In the Philippines was a big problem. So you can look at different eyes. If you look inside the country and you look outside, oh, what's happening now is terrible. I agree, it's terrible. They're killing junkies. But they had 4 million junkies there. The total cities were disrupted, gangs, and same like in Mexico, so many. And then, of course, it's terrible. They killed about 3,000 people or 5,000 people. The government, they really going for it. But the fucking shit is, it works. Because, the people love it. Because, you know, we see the same thing in Amsterdam before. We have the area, the Zeedijk. Yeah. You couldn't go there anymore. Yeah. So drugs really disrupted. But it only disrupt because it's forbidden. Yeah. Because if you give free heroin, free whatever, there is no problem. That is the thing. The only problem is prohibition.
Yeah. Sure. And about South Africa, because I don't know many people know about the trial of the plant happening in South Africa. What's the latest? And can you shortly explain what's happening, Jules? For the people who don't know.
We were arrested on our property a few years ago, and we decided to fight the government, but not from the angle of cannabis being good or bad. It's just that we want the right to make that decision. So we don't get into an argument about CBD and CBN and sleepy time tea or anything. We just want prohibition to end. So our Fields of Green company has produced the trial of the plant, and what we want to do is put the definitive minds for and against cannabis against a jury in front of judges for the world to make an opinion for themselves. So here's argument A and argument B. This is great and this is not good. We have televised it to the world so people can make their own decisions up. And again, break down the barriers of the information. Yeah. So now we wait for a decision from the highest court in South Africa as to whether they will tell the government that the 1992 Drugs Act is completely unconstitutional because it's her right to sit on the couch and smoke weed in her pajamas. Yeah. True story.
Yeah. And you had some big names down there, Myrtle.
Yeah.
Yes, so last year in August, the trial of the plant, it lasted 19 court days. And we had Dr. Donald Abrams from San Francisco, and we had Professor Nutt from the UK. Yeah. And then we had our very own Tony Budden, who's a world hemp expert. And then some other local criminologists, sociologists, everybody who we could possibly get. And then we also had a history expert, which was really important for us because the history of cannabis, that's what prohibition is all about. So the trial lasted 19 days, and then we ran out of time. But then it just happened that there was another case happening in the Western Cape, different province from us. They managed to get a judgment, but then that judgment was only for privacy. And then the state immediately, the next day, they appealed that judgment. And because it was a constitutional issue, it went to the Constitutional Court in November last year. Yeah. So we applied to join with them and bring all of our evidence from the trial of the plant. And we had our hearing in our Constitutional Court, which was the most fantastic day of our lives. It was really amazing to be there. And that was in November last year, and now we wait. Okay. So usually they take 3 months for a judgment. It's been 7 months. And we know that it's such a big decision for the court that we just wait patiently, but it's going to be positive. Okay. Yeah.
And Mike, how do you see? What do you think is going to be a sort of a boost to make things go maybe a bit more faster?
Well, I'm a firm believer in the power of social media. One of the things we've been hearing consistently amongst the panelists today is how it's tough to fight in some of these other countries in civil disobedience. but you can do this online, I feel, in most of these places that haven't banned the internet and this kind of thing. So tools like, Facebook and this kind of thing, you can create an organization, you can make events like we're at today, and you can also use this as a platform to unite and elevate the patient stories is kind of what I like to say. So like Billy Caldwell or Darren Blackwell, or Juanito in Croatia, an MS patient. You just get everyone behind these stories and say, look, you cannot deny that this is a medicine for this patient. You cannot deny them the right. Who are you to deny them this right? Yeah. And so I feel if you can elevate these patient stories, use them, in coalition with fighting in courts and protesting, and civil disobedience, this kind of thing. I think if you can do all these things together, that's the only way we're going to get any change, and it is going to be slow, but we have to keep fighting, and we have to keep doing this every day.
Yeah, sure. But then again, I mean, if you look at Zuid today, I mean, it's the biggest festival in Holland of the Cannabis Festival this year. You also must be proud, Ben. Yes. And in the fact that this is not all because of you, but you have done a lot.
Well, it was it was about 10 or 11 years ago that Jackie Woerlee came to me, or in the group in the Cannabis College, and they came up with this idea to make a cannabis festival, and Liberation Day. So we were the first sponsor because I believed in it. So I'm very proud it works, because so many people in the world are doing things and good things, and that's what is nice to see that, And like you said, it is good to put in the social networks to show the world, and more we see that the people start to understand this plant. Yeah. You want to ask me?
Sure. Because I see what you just said. We have to keep fighting, and it says here, fighting. I fought the system. I went to prison many, many times. But last September in Glastonbury, the heart shack of the planet, we declared peace. We declared that we are at peace, safe in the knowledge that we have inalienable God-given rights to God-given plants. We do not consent to the fraudulent, treasonous, criminal misuse of drugs act. The crime is prohibition. Those who are guilty of the crime are the corporations. The British government is a private corporation. The police, all corporations private. They're the ones that are committing the crime. I think that they need to be forgiven what they've done. But in Britain, in certain parts, certainly in Glastonbury, the war on drugs is totally over. After that declaration of peace, we shared openly full-spectrum cannabis oils to the people who need it for the medicine that it is. On the 420, I said I'm giving 420 hash truffles, publicly advertised all over town. Police came, look for a moment, and when I said all legislation prohibiting cannabis is fundamentally unlawful. This is the difference. It's to law and legislation. Legislation is rules and regulations of private corporations, and it's only law if we consent. The truth is that cannabis is and always will be fundamentally lawful. Its crime is its prohibition.
Yep. Yeah, man. Right.
Cheers. Absolutely. Dana, what would you say? Comment?
Oh, that's all very much. I agree with all that, and the idea that the laws themselves are really unlawful. And talking about the UN thing and the idea that the UN anti-drug treaties all violate the UN human rights conventions and the human rights treaties, and that's a big part of that. And
true. Legislation that's criminal. The law is the law. The love is the law. The law is love. That is the truth. The legislation is the word of man. Takes a God-given plant and criminalizes it. Yep. That's the point I'm wishing to get across.
No, but you got.
Prohibition is criminal.
Well,
the message is clear.
I think it were the Greeks, who started to make laws, and the interesting about it was that law was only to protect people. That was the law, to protect people. And now the law is, like you say, regulations and to protect corporations and whatever,
One of the things I was going to say, it's sort of on that topic of making change, is that cannabis-related businesses and being able to make money and give back. And Ben really, with Sensi Seeds, was pioneering that idea of having a business and finding a way to make a profit. Also, by giving people seeds, you're enabling them to spread cannabis, and then you use your profits to make other positive things happen. That is a wonderful combination. Yeah. And I know that in Canada, Mark Emery, when he met Ben, was like, I'm going to start doing that kind of stuff in Vancouver. And that started from the bong shops, seed banks, and then the selling cannabis itself through dispensaries. And when people, when it's their livelihood, they're also more motivated to like take risks and make change. And if you can generate revenue and then turn that money around and use it to do the things you believe in, that is a very powerful combination. And I really think that that's a key to that, having that, whether you're, and if you're not selling cannabis directly, you know, whatever it is, but finding a way to make your activism profitable. It's a challenge, but it really can be very powerful. And using those profits to then work on the activism stuff that doesn't make money, like events or things, just to make positive change happen. But
does it also count, for example, for Canopy? Are they into these kind of things? Or
well, no, not every business. And what you see is the first bunch of people who open those kind of things and take the risks and push it are those types of people who are activists and see it happen. And then they're followed by other people who are, oh, well, there's an opportunity to get in and make some money. And I think, you know, with the coffee shops, the very first ones were devoted, passionate people trying to make change. But over time, it's like, well, it's a business. And if I can get a permit and that guy can't, that means I make more money. So, and I think we're seeing that in Canada with the company. When I opened my dispensary in Vancouver, I was the third one. The next 6 that opened, I helped them all get open. And I taught them what to do, and I gave them advice, and it may be not good for my business, but I'm not going to have a monopoly on the weed in the city, nor would I want that, right? And then if I did have that, they come and arrest me, and it's all gone. So I always wanted there to be lots of people, but I always told them, people would ask me for advice, and they'd say, well, can I pay you $100 an hour for your advice? I'd say, I don't want your 100. Just pay it forward. When you make a business, and I come to you later and go, hey, you want to donate some money for this good cause, or someone else wants something, put it back into that. And remember that selling cannabis is a business, but it's also, it's more than that. And it's about, I think it's something that you need, until every person is free from prison and there's no prohibition, then maybe you don't have to worry about that. But to me, as long as people are being punished for cannabis, then I think we have a duty to remember that. And as cannabis dealers or people in the cannabis industry, to remember that it's more than just about our business and making cash. And definitely not all the companies are into that in Canada.
Well, a lot of people, a lot of journalists, a lot of activists, but also it's more than, I hear more often that people say it's not only cannabis, it's not only drugs, it's against mankind. I mean, Kenzi, how can you pick up these kind of things, that it's a crime against humanity? It's got nothing to do with drugs.
Well, I think, I don't know if I think it's a crime against humanity. I mean, it's a crime against human rights. It's drug policy that have been repeated violation of human rights, and I think it has to come from initiative like they are doing in South Africa, to protest and to say actively these laws are violating our human dignity and our fundamental rights. And with this kind of changes, with the Tetrix approach I was presenting before, it's how we can maybe bring at the United Nations level or at the global understanding level, not only the politicians but the world population, this idea of fundamental violation of the human dignity and human rights that prohibition has been conveying. Also, violation of the, maybe we could say, the dignity of nature in a way. I mean, willing to eradicate plant. Maybe it's less harmful than eradicating humans, but it's the same kind of concept. Eradicating part of nature is not necessarily a good idea and produces a lot of disorders. So, there is a kind of this disorder created by the fundamentalist approach, which is prohibition. In my idea, we have to first show it with the finger directly, as we are doing in our countries, and then ask for reparation, as also Dana was saying before, and bring the idea, the global understanding that these policies have been historically, in the history of humanity, a black ink thing that we need to clean in a way, or repair, or kind of correct.
I would call the war on drugs a genocide. I think it's a genocide, and I think we used to use that term, people would be, that's not right, but I think if you see the result of it and how it plays out around the world, the war on drugs is absolutely a genocide of dehumanized drug users, is the way I describe that, and I think that's
Yeah, hold on.
I think it's very important to uncover the real spirit of prohibition laws. For instance, in Mexico, I think this 2017, there have been around 50,000 people killed as a result of drugs prohibition laws. And you could say, okay, but those are the criminals who've been committing the crimes. The real, the proper way of seeing this problem, the way I see it in any case, is that the government, in the case of Mexico, but it happens everywhere in the world, in the case of Mexico, is the government that created the laws that prohibit the use of drugs in freedom, and then the people who are able to take very high risk on account of anybody, they are the ones who are fighting each other. So in reality, is the government the one who has been killing these 50,000 people and so. And one last point, and this please a call to the organizers. It would be nice if the coming year we would organize a walk from the center to here, so that not only the people who are convinced are part of the festival, but a lot of more people take place with this. So this a petition, please.
Good idea. A big march towards the festival. Time is up. I want to go a quick round to say your last word. Jules.
There's no way in South Africa anything like has happened in Mexico. When people complain about prohibition in South Africa, they forget what it's like around the world. The police in South Africa are brutal, and the first thing we want to stop is being put in cages. That's our mantra at the moment. Let's deal with all the good and the bad bits in a court of law, but stop putting people in cages, because between Myrtle and I and the company, we formed a system called Join the Queue, because in the constitution that Myrtle talked about, everyone is equal before the law, and it's written in bold. We are equal before the law. So for the last 8 years, Myrtle and I have been on a 1,000-rand bail each. We're not being prosecuted. So our argument in law is nobody should be prosecuted. So we have blocked the courts with prosecutions now, and it's driving them crazy. So we've got 9 out of 11 jurisdictions in South Africa where they're not prosecuting cannabis users, but it hasn't filtered down to the cops. In our country, the cops are the problem. Everything else is going cool, but the cops are corrupt and they're out of control, and they're nasty people, eh? They're nasty.
Okay. Myrtle, you
sorry.
have to go fast.
Just a quick one. We always say in South Africa that you can't get what you want unless you know what you want. So one of the major things that we are working on at the moment is this proposal for the legal regulation of cannabis, and we are going to make this 44-page document into a 400-page document. So when the court have given us the answer, we will go to the government, we'll say, this is what we want. Okay. So I think it's very important to look to the future and know what we want.
Thank you. Mike, last comment.
I just want to thank you guys for having me here, and yeah, we got to keep bringing this, putting this in front of their faces, because things will never change unless we make the change happen. Yeah. And let's do this.
And work together.
Yeah, sure.
Ben, last.
Yeah, I agree with everything in that sense. What we should not forget, I've been in prison a couple of times, and that is horrible. So we should not forget, we sit here free, we can smoke what we want, we can drink what we want. Amsterdam is quite free, but we should not forget there are millions and millions in jail, sometimes for a bag of weed that somebody have in his bag here, and you can go to 20 years and 25 years, and that was in America, that was in many places in the world, and it still happens. Yeah. So it is important also that we raise up, and every time we should remind people, because it can be your sister, your brother, it can be your son, your child. And that's what I see now in Asia. More and more people, my son also with the shabu, and my son also, and my nephew, and And now then people start to realize, hey, there should be another way to do it.
Yeah, let's hope. Dana.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, my message would be to do something and to take action and to find a way, whatever it is. Not everybody can devote their whole life to this. I understand that. But everybody can do something. And this is not something that's going to be done by a few people. This is something that can be done by a lot of people. And we like the phrase, overgrow the government. We're not going to win this with guns and overthrowing and anything, but by so many people standing up and by getting so many seeds out there and growing so much cannabis and having so many of us rising up that we win by numbers and by overgrowing. And so I encourage you to do something, whatever it is, writing letters to the paper, talking to ignorant people, starting a cannabis business, just showing up at events like this is something, but find a way to take action. And don't rely on other people to do that, because whatever your skills are, you can find a way to do a little bit. And this is a unique time in history where we're going to see the end of cannabis prohibition and the drug war over the coming decades. And these have been going on. We've all been born into this, and many generations have been born and died living all the way through cannabis prohibition and the drug war. And sometimes that seems normal. Prohibition seems normal because it's what's been all around us. But when we look back at history, this will be a very abnormal, and we'll look back on cannabis prohibition and this drug war and as a bad, negative thing, the way we look back at other mistakes or things in the past, and they'll be like, we're glad that's over. But I hope that our children and future generations, our grandchildren, will only know about prohibition and drug war because they read about it in history books, and they won't have to live that in their lives. But that'll happen if we do this now. And I think we're so close to this and around the world in so many ways. Let's get it over the top and make it happen and not pass it off to another generation like it was passed down to us.
Would you like something? Last word?
Yeah, I think everything I wanted to say has been said already, so it's cool. I agree, basically. Just I wanted maybe to answer to our Mexican friend. I think next year there will not be edition. It's the 10th edition. I think it's the last also edition of the Liberation Day, because what Dana said, I always refer to Dana, but definitely it's closest. The times are changing. Times are changing, and there is maybe no need to do such kind of events to change laws. There is maybe need of other things. I believe my last words, closing words, would be to say to you all, Dutch people or people living around, to become members of the VOC, the organization setting up this event to follow up the action and the reform after this event.
Thank you, Kenzi. Very nice. Okay, I would thank you lots. Thank you very much. A big round of applause, please.
Your source of cannabis news. Cannabis News Network.